A massive fire engulfs a Sunny Hills home, exposing the HOA's deadly corruption. Only Maya's pool can save the day. If you love drama and justice, like this video, subscribe and hit the bell to catch our latest stories of HOA battles and community triumphs. I'll never forget the morning my dream for the kids in our neighborhood turned into a battlefield. The kind of clash that would expose the ugly underbelly of Sunny Hills, a so-called perfect suburban community in Atlanta where I, Maya Johnson, a 34-year-old black single mom and community organizer, had poured my heart into building something meaningful for the children who look like me. Kids who rarely got a fair shot at joy in a place like this. And it all started with a pool, a big, beautiful pool I'd spent every penny of my savings to build in my backyard. Not for myself, but for the dozens of children in this area who had nowhere safe to play during the scorching Georgia summers. Especially the black and brown kids, who were often chased off public parks by judgmental eyes or outright hostility. And I just finished filling it with crystal clear water the night before. The sound of laughter already echoing in my mind as I pictured little ones splashing and giggling. Their parents finally able to breathe easy, knowing their babies had a place to be kids. But that vision shattered at 8 o'clock a.m. when I heard a sharp, entitled voice cutting through the morning air. Maya Johnson, you have exactly 24 hours to tear this monstrosity down, or the HOA will do it for you. And there she was, Karen Phillips, the HOA president, standing on my front lawn in her pristine red blazer, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, clutching her precious clipboard like it gave her the power to control the world. Her pale blue eyes glaring at me with a mix of disgust and superiority that I'd seen too many times before. The kind of look that screamed, "You don't belong here." And I knew exactly what she meant by that. Because I'd heard the whispers ever since I moved into Sunny Hills 2 years ago. Comments like, "How can she afford this place?" Or "This neighborhood's going downhill since people like her started moving in." And I wasn't naive. I knew what people like her meant. They meant black. They meant working class. They meant someone who didn't fit their cookie-cutter image of what a Sunny Hills resident should be. But I dealt with that noise by keeping my head down, working my 2 jobs as a nurse and a part-time organizer, and focusing on raising my 9-year-old son, Jamal, while trying to make this community better for everyone, not just the Karens of the world. And now here she was, threatening to destroy the one thing I'd built to give these kids a chance at happiness. Her voice dripping with condescension as she waved a piece of paper in my face. This pool violates Section 12, 4 of the HOA bylaws. No unapproved external structures over 500 square feet. And I certainly didn't approve this eyesore. And I felt my blood boil, my hands trembling as I stepped out onto my porch. The morning sun beating down on us. Neighbors already peeking through their curtains to watch the showdown. And I shot back. "Karen, I submitted the plans to the HOA 6 months ago. I got permits from the city. I followed every rule in the book. And you know it. This isn't about bylaws. This is about you not wanting black kids playing in your precious neighborhood." And her face twisted, her fake smile dropping for a split second before she recovered, stepping closer to me, her voice lowering into a hiss that sent chills down my spine. "Don't you dare make this about race, Maya. I'm just enforcing the rules. But since you brought it up, maybe you should think about whether you and your kind really belong in a place like Sunny Hills. This pool is going to attract all sorts of trouble. Loud kids, crime, you name it. And I won't let you drag our property values down with your little charity project." And there it was, the mask slipping, the racism I'd always suspected now spilling out in broad daylight. And I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my fists clenching at my sides as I fought the urge to scream, because I knew that's what she wanted, to paint me as the angry black woman so she could justify her crusade. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "This pool is for every child in this neighborhood. Karen, not just the ones you deem acceptable. And I'm not tearing it down, so you'd better bring your bulldozers, because I'll be standing right here waiting." And her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer as she jotted something down on her clipboard. muttering, "Oh, you'll regret this, Maya. I promise you that," before turning on her heels and storming off. Her designer pumps clicking against the pavement, leaving me standing there, my mind racing with a mix of rage and determination, because I knew this was just the beginning. And as I looked at the sparkling pool behind my house, I couldn't help but think of the kids who deserve this. Kids like Jamal, who'd already been called names at school. Kids who needed a place to feel safe and seen. And I swore to myself that I'd fight for them, no matter what Karen and her HOA threw at me. But what I didn't know then was how far she'd go to destroy me, or how that pool would end up saving more than just the children. It would save an entire family from a fire that would expose the HOA's darkest secrets. The next few days felt like a storm brewing over Sunny Hills, the kind of tension that made the air thick and heavy, and I, Maya Johnson, could feel it pressing down on me as I stood in my kitchen, staring at the bright orange violation notice taped to my front door, the second one in 48 hours. This time claiming my pool was a public safety hazard because it lacked a fence, even though I'd already ordered one and it was due to arrive next week. But Karen Phillips wasn't interested in facts. She was on a mission to make my life miserable, and she was using every bondage trick in the HOA playbook to do it. Her words from our confrontation still echoing in my head. "You and your kind don't belong here." A phrase that cut deeper than I wanted to admit, because I'd heard it before. Not just here, but all my life. Growing up in a small Georgia town where my family was one of the few black ones. Where I'd been followed in stores. Where my high school teachers told me I'd never amount to much. And now here I was, a nurse, a mom, a homeowner, still fighting the same old battles. But this time I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for the kids who deserve better. And that's what kept me going as I peeled the notice off my door and added it to the growing pile on my counter. My son Jamal tugging at my sleeve, his big brown eyes wide with worry as he asked, "Mama, are they going to take our pool away?" And I forced a smile, kneeling down to his level, brushing a hand over his tight curls as I said, "Not if I can help it. Baby, this pool is for you and your friends, and I'm going to make sure you get to swim in it all summer long." But even as I said the words, I could hear the whispers starting to spread through the neighborhood. Karen had been busy, knocking on doors, spreading her poison, telling anyone who'd listen that my pool was going to ruin property values and bring in the wrong crowd. And I knew what she meant by that, because I'd already caught Mrs. Henderson from across the street giving me the side eye as I watered my garden. Her lips pursed as she muttered to her husband, loud enough for me to hear. I knew things would change when she moved in. Now we've got a public pool in our backyard. What's next? A block party every weekend? And I wanted to march over there and set her straight, to tell her that the pool wasn't for parties. It was for kids who had nowhere else to go. Kids who couldn't afford the fancy swim clubs Karen's children went to. Kids who deserved a chance to cool off in the Georgia heat without being chased off by security guards or worse. But I held my tongue, knowing that losing my temper would only play into their narrative, the angry black woman stereotype they were itching to slap on me. And instead I turned my focus to the fight ahead, pulling out my laptop to draft a letter to the HOA board, laying out every detail of my permits and plans. Hoping there was at least one reasonable person on that board who'd listen, but deep down I knew Karen had them all in her pocket, because I'd seen how she operated at the last HOA meeting I attended, the way she'd dismissed a Latino family's request to plant a vegetable garden with a wave of her hand, saying, "We don't do that kind of thing here. It's not in keeping with the aesthetic," her tone dripping with disdain. And I'd watched that family shrink in their seats, their faces burning with shame. And I swore I'd never let her do that to me. But now the pressure was mounting, because just as I hit send on my email, my phone buzzed with a text from my friend Aisha, another black mom in the neighborhood. Her message short and panicked. "Maya, check the neighborhood Facebook group. Karen's on a rampage." And I opened the app to find a post from Karen, pinned at the top of the group. A photo of my pool with a caption that made my stomach churn. "This unapproved structure is a blight on our community. attracting noise, trespassers, and safety risks. We must protect Sunny Hills from those who don't respect our standards. And the comments below were a mix of support for her and outright racism. One neighbor writing, "I moved here to get away from that kind of thing. If she wants a community pool, she should move back to where she came from." And another chiming in, "This is what happens when you let certain people into a nice neighborhood." And I felt my chest tighten, the words hitting me like a punch, because I knew certain people meant me, meant black, meant anyone who didn't fit their narrow idea of who deserved to live here. And I wanted to scream, to type a response that would shut them all down. But I stopped myself, knowing that engaging would only fuel their fire. And instead I called Aisha, my voice shaking as I said, "They're not just coming for the pool. Aisha, they're coming for us, for our kids, for our right to even exist here." And she sighed, her voice heavy with the same exhaustion I felt. "I know. Maya, I've been dealing with it too. Last week, Karen fined me for having too many visitors when my cousins came over for a barbecue. She said it was a safety concern, but we both know what she really meant." And we talked late into the night, sharing our stories, our frustrations, our fears. And by the time I hung up, I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I needed to build a coalition, to reach out to other families who'd been targeted by Karen's HOA. Because if we were going to stand up to her, we'd have to do it together. But what I didn't realize then was how deep the HOA's corruption ran, or how their negligence would soon put the entire neighborhood at risk, a danger that would make my pool the least of their worries. Because while Karen was busy trying to tear me down, a much bigger disaster was looming, one that would expose her for the fraud she really was. The tension in Sunny Hills had reached a boiling point by the end of that week, and Maya Johnson, could feel the neighborhood splitting apart like a fault line, the cracks running deep along lines of race and class that I'd always known were there, but had hoped wouldn't tear us apart. And it all came to a head on Saturday afternoon when I decided to host a community swim day at my pool. A chance for the kids to have some fun, and for me to show my neighbors that this wasn't about causing trouble, but about building something better for all of us. So I spent the morning setting up, hanging streamers in bright reds and yellows across my backyard, laying out a table with lemonade and cookies, and putting up a handmade sign that read, "Sunny Hills Kids Swim Day, all welcome." Because I wanted everyone to feel included, not just the black and brown families I knew would show up, but also the white families who might be on the fence, the ones who'd been whispering behind my back but hadn't yet made up their minds about me. And by noon, the backyard was buzzing with laughter, little kids splashing in the pool, their parents chatting on the grass, some of them meeting for the first time, like Aisha's cousin Tasha, who brought her twin girls, and Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street, a Latina grandmother who'd been fined by Karen last month for having a too colorful mailbox, and even Mr. Thompson, a quiet white retiree who lived 2 doors down and had always waved politely but never said much. And I felt a flicker of hope as I watched them all together, thinking maybe, just maybe, we could bridge the divide. But that hope didn't last long, because around 2:00 p.m., I heard the screech of tires outside my house, and I looked out to see Karen Phillips stepping out of her sleek black SUV, her red blazer as sharp as ever, followed by 2 police officers, their hands resting on their belts as they marched toward my backyard, and my heart sank, because I knew exactly what this was. Karen had called the cops on us, and as she stormed through my gate, her voice rang out. "This is an unauthorized gathering. Maya, you're in violation of HOA noise ordinances and hosting a public event without a permit. I warned you about bringing trouble into this neighborhood." And I felt the eyes of every parent on me, the kids freezing in the pool as they sensed the tension, and I stepped forward, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "Karen, this is my private property. I'm allowed to have friends over, and there's no noise ordinance being broken. We're just kids playing. Why don't you leave us alone?" But her eyes gleamed with malice as she turned to the officers, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "Officer, this woman is running an illegal community pool. She's endangering the neighborhood. I demand you shut this down immediately. And I could see the officers hesitate. One of them, a younger black man, glancing at the kids in the pool with a flicker of sympathy, but the other, an older white officer, nodded at Karen, his jaw tight as he said, "Ma'am, we've had complaints about noise and trespassing. We'll need to clear this out." And I felt my stomach drop because I knew what this looked like. A black woman hosting a gathering for mostly black and brown kids. And now the police were here to restore order. The kind of scene I'd seen play out too many times in my life, but I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. So I pulled out my phone, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm recording this, officers, and I'd like to know exactly what law I'm breaking by letting kids swim in my backyard." And that seemed to make the older officer pause, his eyes narrowing as he realized I wasn't going to back down. But Karen wasn't done. She turned to the crowd, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm just trying to keep this neighborhood safe. We can't have these kinds of gatherings. They attract the wrong element. You all know what I mean." And I saw Mrs. Rodriguez's face harden, her hands clenching as she muttered under her breath, "She means us. She means anyone who's not white." And I knew she was right, because I'd heard the same rhetoric before, the coded language of wrong element in safety concerns that always meant one thing: keep people of color out. And that's when Aisha stepped forward, her voice shaking with anger as she said, "You called the police on a kid's swim day. Karen, you're the one causing trouble, not us. Why don't you tell everyone why you really hate this pool? Because it's not about noise. It's about who's swimming in it." And the crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncomfortable. And I saw Mr. Thompson shift on his feet, his face conflicted as he watched the scene unfold. But Karen didn't back down, her smile cold as she said, "I don't care who's swimming. I care about the rules. And if you can't follow them, maybe you should find somewhere else to live." And that was the moment the neighborhood truly split, because I saw some parents start to gather their kids, their faces tight with fear as they whispered to each other, not wanting to get involved, while others, like Aisha and Mrs. Rodriguez, stayed put, their eyes blazing with defiance. And I knew then that this wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about who got to belong in Sunny Hills, who got to feel safe here, and who didn't. And as the officers finally backed off, warning me to keep it down before leaving, Karen shot me a look that promised more trouble, her parting words chilling me to the bone. "This isn't over, Maya. You're going to wish you'd never moved here." And as I watched her drive away, the kids slowly returning to the pool, their laughter more subdued now, I felt the weight of what I was up against. Because this wasn't just a fight against Karen. It was a fight against the deep-seated racism and classism that had been simmering in this neighborhood for years. And I knew I'd have to dig deeper, to find a way to expose the truth about the HOA. Because if I didn't, they'd keep coming for me, for my son, for all of us. But what I didn't know then was that the real danger wasn't Karen's threats. It was the ticking time bomb she'd already set in motion with her greed, a disaster that would soon engulf the entire neighborhood in flames. And the days following the swim day felt like Maya Johnson was walking through a minefield in Sunny Hills. Every step a gamble as Karen Phillips and her HOA cronies tightened their grip, and I could sense the walls closing in, the weight of their hostility pressing down harder with each new violation notice slapped on my door. This time accusing me of unpermitted water usage for filling my pool, a ridiculous charge considering I'd paid my utility bills on time. But I knew this wasn't about the rules. It was about control, about Karen trying to break me, to force me out of this neighborhood she believed I didn't belong in. And I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every black and brown family who'd ever felt the sting of her prejudice. So I decided to dig deeper, to find something, anything, that could turn the tide against her. And that's when I started looking into the HOA's records, spending late nights at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, combing through public documents and financial reports I'd requested from the county, because I'd heard whispers from neighbors like Mrs. Rodriguez about how the HOA's fees kept going up, but nothing ever got fixed. No new streetlights, no repaved roads, and definitely no working fire hydrants, which I'd noticed during a walk with Jamal last month. The hydrant on our street rusted over and leaking, a detail that stuck in my mind as I scrolled through the HOA's budget reports. And that's when I found it. A line item buried in the 2023 financial statement, $75,000 allocated for fire safety upgrades. But there was no record of any work being done, no contracts, no invoices, nothing. And my heart started racing as I realized this could be the key. Because if the HOA was misusing funds, that wasn't just negligence, it was fraud. And I knew I had to be careful, because Karen wasn't the type to let something like this slide. So I reached out to Aisha, whispering over the phone late that night. I think I've got something on the HOA. They took money for fire safety but didn't do the work. We need to find proof. And Aisha's voice was a mix of excitement and fear as she replied, Maya, if this is true, it's huge. But Karen's not going to let you expose her without a fight. She's got connections. You know that. And I did know, because I'd seen how she operated, how she'd cozy up to county officials at HOA meetings, how she'd name-drop the police chief like they were old friends. But I couldn't back down now. So I started reaching out to other neighbors I trusted, like Mr. Thompson, who'd been at the swim day and had seemed uneasy about Karen's behavior. And I knocked on his door the next morning, my voice low as I showed him the financial report. Mr. Thompson, I think the HOA's been stealing our money. This says they spent $75,000 on fire safety. But look at the hydrants. They're falling apart. Do you know anything about this? And his face darkened, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. I've been on the HOA board for years. Maya, I stepped down last year because I couldn't stomach it anymore. Karen's been running things like her personal piggy bank. She'd push through emergency fees and the money would disappear. I tried to raise concerns, but she threatened to fine me for my grandson's bike being parked on the sidewalk, said she'd make my life hell if I kept asking questions. And I felt a chill run down my spine, because this was bigger than I'd thought. If Karen was willing to intimidate a board member, what would she do to me? But Mr. Thompson wasn't done. He pulled out a folder from his desk, his voice barely above a whisper. I kept copies of some of the budgets. Look at this. Last year they charged us for community landscaping, but the work went to Karen's nephew's company, and I'm pretty sure half of it never happened. And as I flipped through the papers, I saw more discrepancies. Thousands of dollars funneled into projects that never materialized, and I knew I had to take this to the next level. So I called a friend from my organizing days, Jamal's godfather, Marcus, who worked as an investigative journalist for a local paper, and I sent him everything I'd found. My voice urgent as I said, Marcus, I need you to look into this. The HOA's been stealing from us, and I think it's why our fire hydrants don't work. If something happens, we're all at risk. And Marcus's tone was serious. Maya, this is explosive. I'll dig into it, but you need to watch your back. People like Karen don't play fair when their secrets are threatened. And he was right, because the very next day, I got a certified letter from the HOA's lawyer, a cease and desist order accusing me of defamation for spreading lies about the board, threatening to sue me for damages if I didn't stop interfering with their operations. And I felt a wave of panic, because I didn't have the money for a legal battle. I was already stretched thin paying for the pool and keeping up with my mortgage, but I also knew this was a scare tactic, Karen's way of trying to silence me, and I wasn't going to let her win. So I called Marcus again, my voice firm. I'm not backing down. Keep digging. We need hard proof. And as I hung up, I looked out my window to see Karen standing across the street, staring at my house, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold determination. And I knew she was planning her next move. But what I didn't know then was how close we were to disaster, because while I was uncovering the HOA's corruption, a spark was already smoldering in the Thompsons' garage 2 streets over, a faulty wire that would soon ignite into a fire that would change everything, exposing not just Karen's greed, but the deadly consequences of her negligence. And my pool, the one she'd fought so hard to destroy, would be the only thing standing between life and death for an entire family. Yet, it was just past midnight when the first scream pierced the stillness of Sunny Hills, a sound so raw and desperate that it yanked me, Maya Johnson, out of a restless sleep. My heart pounding as I bolted upright in bed, the air thick with an acrid smell I couldn't place at first. And then I heard it again, another scream, this time followed by shouts of, "Fire! Fire!" coming from somewhere down the street, and I threw on a jacket over my pajamas, my mind racing as I grabbed my phone and ran to Jamal's room, shaking him awake, his sleepy eyes wide with confusion as I said, "Baby, stay here. Lock the door. Mama's going to check on the neighbors. I'll be right back." And I didn't wait for his response, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood as I sprinted out my front door, the night sky glowing an eerie orange. And that's when I saw it. The Thompsons' house 2 streets over, flames licking up the side of their 2-story colonial, the fire already spreading to the roof, thick black smoke billowing into the air, and I could hear Mrs. Thompson's voice, shrill with panic. "Help! My husband's still inside!" As she stood on the lawn in her nightgown, clutching her 2 kids, their faces streaked with tears, and neighbors were sarvis to the bathroom, some in robes, others half-dressed, their voices a chaotic mix of fear and confusion. "Where's the fire truck? Did anyone call 911? And I pulled out my phone, dialing emergency services as I ran toward the blaze, my voice shaking as I shouted, "There's a fire at 42 Sunny Hills Lane. We need help now." But the dispatcher's response made my blood run cold. "Ma'am, the nearest fire truck is 15 minutes out. There's a major accident on the highway. Do what you can to contain it." And I hung up, my eyes darting to the rusted fire hydrant on the corner, the one I'd noticed months ago, the one the HOA was supposed to fix with that $75,000 they'd claimed to spend. And I ran over, twisting the valve with all my strength, but nothing came out, not a drop, just a faint hiss. And I felt a wave of rage and helplessness, because this was exactly what I'd feared. The HOA's corruption wasn't just about money, it was about lives. And now the Thompsons were paying the price, the flames roaring louder as the heat hit my face. And that's when I remembered my pool, the one Karen had tried so hard to destroy, the one filled with thousands of gallons of water sitting just 2 streets away. And I didn't think twice. I turned to the crowd, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Everyone, follow me. We've got water in my pool. We can use it to fight the fire." And I sprinted back to my house, neighbors trailing behind me, their faces a mix of shock and determination. Aisha among them, her voice steady as she shouted, "Maya, I've got buckets in my garage. I'll grab them." While Mr. Rodriguez ran to his shed for a hose, and within minutes we had a makeshift brigade, a line of neighbors passing buckets of water from my pool to the Thompsons' house, the kids helping too, their small hands trembling but resolute as they handed off each bucket. And I grabbed the hose Mr. Rodriguez brought, connecting it to the pool's drainage valve, the water spraying out in a weak but steady stream as I aimed it at the base of the flames, the heat searing my skin as I got closer, my eyes stinging from the smoke. But I kept going, because I could hear Mr. Thompson's coughs from inside, faint but alive, and I wasn't going to let him die. Not on my watch. Not when I knew this fire could have been stopped if Karen had done her job. And as we worked, I saw her, Karen Phillips, standing at the edge of the crowd, her red blazer swapped for a silk robe, her face pale as she watched the scene unfold. And I knew she was thinking the same thing I was, that this was her fault, that her greed had led to this. But she didn't step forward to help. Instead, she started shouting, her voice laced with desperation. "This is Maya's fault. Her pool distracted everyone. We should have been focusing on calling for help, not playing hero." And I couldn't believe her nerve. My voice raw as I yelled back, "Karen, the hydrants don't work because you stole the money to fix them. This is on you." And I saw the crowd turn, their eyes narrowing as they looked at her, whispers spreading like wildfire. Is that true? Did the HOA take the money? And Karen's face twisted, her hands clenching as she snapped. That's a lie. I've done everything for this neighborhood. You're the problem. Maya, always stirring up trouble. But no one was listening to her anymore. Because just then, Mr. Thompson stumbled out of the house, his face blackened with soot, coughing violently as he collapsed into his wife's arms. And the crowd cheered, the flames finally starting to die down as we kept pouring water from the pool. The fire reduced to smoldering embers by the time the fire truck finally arrived, their sirens a hollow echo after we'd already done the hard work. And as the firefighters took over, I turned to Karen, my voice low but firm. You can't hide from this, Karen. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone knows the truth now. And her eyes darted around, seeing the angry faces of the neighbors, the Thompsons sobbing in each other's arms. And for the first time, I saw fear in her expression because she knew she'd been exposed. But what I didn't expect was how quickly the community would rally. Because as I caught my breath, covered in soot and sweat, Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed my hand, her voice fierce. Maya, we're with you. We want answers. We want justice. And I knew then that this fire hadn't just saved the Thompsons. It had lit a spark in Sunny Hills, a spark that would burn through Karen's lies and finally bring the truth to light. But the fight was far from over, because Karen wasn't going to go down without a fight. And I had no idea what she'd do next to protect her secrets. The morning after the fire felt like the calm before a storm in Sunny Hills. The air still tinged with the faint smell of smoke as Maya Johnson, stood on my front porch, my body aching from the night's chaos, my clothes still smudged with soot, but my mind sharper than ever, because I knew the fire at the Thompsons' house had changed everything, not just for them, but for the entire neighborhood. And as I watched the news vans pull into the street, there are cameras already rolling. I could feel the momentum building, a wave of anger and determination rippling through the community as neighbors gathered in small clusters, their voices low but fierce, demanding answers about why the fire hydrants had failed, why the HOA had left us all vulnerable. And I knew this was my chance to strike, to expose Karen Phillips and her corruption once and for all. So I called Marcus, my journalist friend, my voice steady despite the exhaustion. Marcus, it's time, the fire last night. The hydrants didn't work. We had to use my pool to save the Thompsons. Everyone's talking. We need to get this story out now. And Marcus didn't hesitate, his tone urgent. I've got everything, Maya. I dug into the HOA's finances. It's worse than we thought. Karen's been funneling money to her family for years. I'm on my way to Sunny Hills with a news crew. We're going live this afternoon. And as I hung up, I saw Mrs. Rodriguez marching toward me, her face set with resolve, a stack of papers in her hands. Maya, I found more. These are HOA meeting minutes from the last 3 years. Look at this. They voted to approve emergency maintenance fees, but the money never went to maintenance. It went to Karen's nephew's construction company. And here's a receipt for a consulting fee paid to her sister, $20,000 for community planning. What community planning? We don't even have a working playground. And I felt my jaw tighten as I scanned the documents. Each one a piece of the puzzle, proof that Karen had been stealing from us, putting her own greed above the safety of the neighborhood. And I knew we had to act fast. So I gathered Aisha, Mrs. Rodriguez, and a few other neighbors who'd been at the fire, and we planned an emergency community meeting right there in my front yard, setting up folding chairs and a makeshift podium from an old crate. And by 2 p.m., the lawn was packed, over 50 residents crammed together, their faces a mix of anger and curiosity. The news crew setting up in the back as Marcus gave me a nod, and I stepped up to speak, my voice carrying over the crowd. Last night, the Thompsons almost lost everything because the fire hydrants in Sunny Hills don't work. We had to use my pool to save their home, a pool the HOA tried to tear down because they didn't want black and brown kids playing here. But this isn't just about the pool. It's about what the HOA has been doing with our money. Money we paid for safety, for maintenance, money they stole. And I held up the financial records, passing copies to the crowd. Here's the proof, $75,000 for fire safety upgrades that never happened. Thousands more paid to Karen's family for fake projects, while we were left with broken hydrants and no protection. And the crowd erupted. Shouts of, "That's our money!" And how could they do this, echoing through the yard? And that's when Karen arrived, her SUV screeching to a stop at the edge of my property, her face red with fury as she stormed toward me, her voice shrill. "This is slander. Maya, you have no right to spread these lies. I've dedicated years to this community, and you're trying to ruin it with your accusations." But I didn't flinch, holding up the documents for everyone to see. "These aren't lies, Karen. These are facts. Your own records show where the money went. Straight to your nephew, your sister, your friends. While we were left to fend for ourselves during a fire, you failed us, and we're done with you." And the crowd roared in agreement, some even stepping forward to confront her, Mr. Thompson among them, his voice hoarse from the smoke he'd inhaled. "My family could have died, Karen, because of you. I trusted the HOA to keep us safe, and you betrayed us." And I saw Karen's composure crack, her hands shaking as she tried to defend herself. "I followed the rules. I did what was best for Sunny Hills. You're all ungrateful, especially you, Maya, stirring up trouble since the day you moved in." But her words fell flat because Marcus stepped forward, his camera crew capturing every moment, his voice calm but cutting. "Ms. Phillips, we've reviewed the HOA's financials with a forensic accountant. There's evidence of over $150,000 in misappropriated funds over the last 3 years. The county prosecutor's office has been notified, and they'll be investigating you and the board for fraud." And Karen's face went white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, because she knew she was caught. And the crowd surged forward, demanding her resignation, chanting, "Step down, step down." Baina, she backed away, her eyes darting around for an escape. But there was none, because the truth was out, and Sunny Hills wasn't hers to control anymore. And as she fled to her car, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Rodriguez's voice, soft but firm. "You did it, Maya. You gave us a voice. But this isn't over. We need to rebuild, and we need you to lead us." And I looked at the crowd, their faces a mix of hope and anger. And I knew she was right, because exposing Karen was just the beginning. We had to create something new, an HOA that worked for everyone, not just the Karens of the world. But I also knew the fight wasn't over, because Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. And as I watched her car speed away, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had one last card to play, a final act of revenge that would test us all. But for now, I turned back to the crowd, ready to take on whatever came next, because Sunny Hills was worth fighting for, and so were the kids who called it home. The weeks following Karen Phillips's public downfall felt like a new dawn in Sunny Hills, a chance for me, Maya Johnson, to help rebuild a community that had been fractured by racism, classism, and greed. And I could feel the shift as I walked through the neighborhood, the air no longer heavy with suspicion, but buzzing with a cautious hope. Neighbors who'd once avoided me now waving hello, their smiles tentative but genuine. And I knew we had a long way to go. But the fire had lit more than just a blaze at the Thompsons' house. It had sparked a movement, one that started in my front yard that day when we exposed Karen's corruption. And now, with her forced resignation after the county launched an official investigation into the HOA's finances, the residents of Sunny Hills had voted to dissolve the old board entirely, holding an emergency election to form a new HOA. And I found myself at the center of it all, nominated by Mrs. Rodriguez and Aisha to join the new board. A role I accepted not because I wanted power, but because I wanted change. So we got to work, meeting late into the night at my kitchen table, drafting new bylaws that prioritize fairness and transparency, rules that allowed kids to play basketball in their driveways, let families paint their doors whatever color they wanted, and most importantly, ensured every penny of HOA fees went to actual community improvements, like fixing the fire hydrants that had failed us. And we didn't stop there. I proposed turning my pool into an official community space, a place where all kids could swim for free, no matter their race or background. And the board agreed, allocating funds to install a proper fence and hire a lifeguard. And by the end of the month, the pool was bustling every afternoon. Black kids, Latino kids, white kids splashing together, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. A sound that felt like healing. And I watched from my porch, my heart swelling as I saw Jamal teaching a little white girl how to float. Her parents, the Wilsons, chatting with Aisha like they'd been friends for years. And I thought maybe, just maybe, we were starting to break down the walls that had divided us for so long. But not everyone was ready to let go of the past, because while most of the neighborhood embraced the changes, there were still a few holdouts, like Mrs. Henderson, who'd been Karen's biggest supporter. And I overheard her at the grocery store one day, her voice low but venomous as she whispered to another neighbor, "This place isn't what it used to be. Ever since Maya took over, it's all gone downhill." I didn't sign up to live in a charity case, and I felt my chest tighten, because I knew what she meant. She meant she didn't want to live around people like me, people of color, people who didn't fit her idea of what Sunny Hills should be. But I didn't let her words stop me. Instead, I doubled down, organizing a community barbecue at the pool to celebrate the new HOA, inviting everyone, even Mrs. Henderson, because I believed in second chances. And to my surprise, she showed up, her face tight with discomfort as she watched the diverse crowd mingle. But her husband struck up a conversation with Mr. Rodriguez about gardening. And by the end of the day, I saw her crack a small smile as Jamal handed her a slice of watermelon. And I thought maybe there was hope for her too. But while the community was coming together, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done with us, because Marcus had called me the day before, his voice tense. "Maya, I've been digging into Karen's past. She's got a history of this. 3 other neighborhoods where she pulled the same stunts, siphoning money, targeting minorities. She always settled quietly and moved on. But this time she's not settling. I heard she's been meeting with a lawyer. She might be planning something." And I felt a chill run down my spine, because I knew Karen's pride wouldn't let her walk away without a fight. And I was right, because the very next day, I woke up to find a petition circulating on the neighborhood Facebook group, posted by an anonymous account but clearly Karen's doing, claiming the new HOA was illegitimate and pushing a radical agenda, accusing me of using race to divide the community. And I couldn't believe the irony, because if anyone had divided Sunny Hills, it was her, with her racism and greed. But the petition was gaining traction, a few of her old allies signing on, and I knew we had to act fast. So I called an emergency board meeting, gathering Aisha, Mrs. Rodriguez, and the others in my living room. My voice firm as I said, "We can't let Karen tear us apart again. We need to show the neighborhood what we're really about. Let's organize a fire safety workshop, invite the fire department to test the new hydrants, prove we're doing the work Karen never did." And the board agreed, setting the event for the following weekend. And it was a success, the fire department demonstrating how the newly repaired hydrants worked. Kids cheering as water sprayed into the air, and I saw Mrs. Henderson there, her expression softening as she watched. But just as I started to feel like we were winning, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Maya, be careful. Karen's been meeting with a private investigator. I think she's digging into your past, trying to find something to discredit you." And I felt my stomach drop, because I didn't have any skeletons in my closet. But I knew how people like Karen operated. They'd twist anything to fit their narrative. And as I looked out at the crowd, the kids playing, the neighbors laughing, I knew I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the future of Sunny Hills, a future where everyone belonged. And I wasn't going to let Karen take that away from us, no matter what she had planned. Well, the summer sun was high over Sunny Hills as Maya Johnson. stood in my backyard, watching the kids splash in the community pool we'd fought so hard to keep, their laughter a melody that seemed to heal the scars of the past year. And I couldn't help but smile, because this was what I dreamed of all along, a place where every child, no matter their race or background, could feel safe and seen. But the journey to get here had been anything but easy. And as I looked out at the neighborhood, now vibrant with color and life, I knew the final chapter of our battle with Karen Phillips was about to unfold. Because Marcus had been right, Karen wasn't going to let her defeat stand, and the day after our fire safety workshop, I woke up to a bombshell, a smear campaign launched on a local blog, accusing me of everything from tax evasion to exploiting the community for personal gain, complete with doctored photos of my house and claims I'd used HOA funds to build the pool. All traced back to an anonymous source Marcus quickly linked to Karen's private investigator, and I felt my stomach churn, because I knew this was her last desperate attempt to discredit me, to turn the neighborhood against me, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. So I called an emergency meeting with the new HOA board, my voice steady as I laid out the situation. Karen's trying to tear us down one last time. She's spreading lies to scare people. But we've got the receipts. Every penny we've spent is documented, and we're not backing down. And Aisha nodded, her eyes fierce. Let's go public. Maya, we'll hold a press conference, show the neighborhood we've got nothing to hide. And that's exactly what we did, gathering in the community center with Marcus and his news crew. The room packed with residents as I stood at the podium, my hands steady as I held up our financial records. These accusations are false. Every dollar we've spent has gone to fixing what Karen broke. New hydrants, the community pool, a playground for our kids. We've done this together, for all of us, and we won't let lies stop us now. And the crowd cheered, their support a wall Karen couldn't break. But she didn't stop there, because the next day, she filed a lawsuit against the new HOA, claiming we'd illegally seized control and demanding reinstatement as president. And I felt a wave of exhaustion, because I just wanted this to be over, to focus on healing Sunny Hills, not fighting in court. But Marcus uncovered something that turned the tables, a paper trail showing Karen had never legally been elected HOA president in the first place. Her appointment a backroom deal with her cronies years ago, and when we presented that evidence in court, her case collapsed, the judge dismissing her claims with a stern warning, Ms. Phillips, you've wasted this court's time, and I suggest you cease harassing this community. And I watched Karen's face crumple, her last shred of power slipping away as she stormed out of the courtroom. And that was the last we saw of her, because a week later, her house went up for sale, her prized rose bushes dug up as she moved away, leaving Sunny Hills for good. And I heard through Marcus that she'd relocated to another suburb, already trying to join their HOA. But I knew she'd never have the same power again, because Sunny Hills had taught her a lesson, that communities thrive on unity, not division. And as the months passed, our neighborhood blossomed, the pool becoming a symbol of what we'd achieved. A place where kids of all races played together, where parents shared stories over lemonade, where Mrs. Henderson, once Karen's staunchest ally, now volunteered to teach swimming lessons, her walls finally coming down. And we didn't stop at the pool. We built a community garden where Mr. Rodriguez grew tomatoes, a playground where Jamal and his fur friends could climb and laugh, and we even started a scholarship fund for kids in need, using the leftover HOA fees Karen had hoarded. And one evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Aisha joined me, her voice soft. Maya, you changed this place. You showed us what's possible when we stand together. I'm proud of you. And I felt tears prick my eyes, because I hadn't done it alone. It was all of us, the Black families, the Latino families, the white families who'd chosen to see past their biases. And as I looked out at the neighborhood, I thought about the fire that had started it all, how it had nearly destroyed the Thompsons' home, but had ended up saving Sunny Hills, because sometimes the worst moments lead to the greatest change. And I knew that was the real victory, Not the headlines or the new laws we'd inspired, but the little things, like seeing Mrs. Rodriguez's garden bloom with colors Karen had once banned, or watching Jamal and his friends race across the lawn without fear of violation notices. And as the new family moved into Karen's old house, a black couple with 2 kids and a dog, I saw neighbors show up to help them unpack, a sight that made my heart swell, because this was the sunny hills I'd always wanted, a place where everyone belonged, where racism and classism couldn't take root. And as I hugged Jamal goodnight, his small voice whispering, "Mama, I love our pool," I knew we'd done more than save a neighborhood. We'd changed hearts, and that was a legacy worth fighting for. Maya's fight against a racist HOA turned her pool into a lifesaver, exposing corruption and uniting Sunny Hills. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell for our latest videos on community heroes and HOA drama. You won't want to miss what's next.